Hi, Darrin. Welcome to the podcast.
Good afternoon. How you doing?
I can tell by your bio that you've got a lot of different hats that you wear. So would you tell us about some of the different hats you wear?
Sure. Well, currently I am the VP of sales for a company called Triage Now. Been there since day one. It started off literally as a idea scratched down on a napkin kind of entrepreneurial venture, and have helped grow that over the past 8 years into a prominent competitor in the workers' comp space for what we do. In addition to that, this is my 14th season as the Arizona State University head racquetball coach. I coached the men's and women's racquetball team. Before that, I was a competitive player myself. I was in the top 20 in the world for about 3 years. It's been quite a few years since I've played competitively, but still list that as something that I'm very proud of that I did. I've written 5 different books, 3 of them actually specifically about racquetball. Currently, I am actively pursuing public speaking and maybe doing a little bit of consulting work in terms of helping a sales team navigate the waters, especially in today's climate with things have changed so radically this year with the COVID pandemic. So that stuff keeps me busy. When I have time, I want to spend as much time as possible fly fishing, especially with my dad, but any fly fishing trip is time well spent for sure.
What is it about being out there fly fishing that you like?
Well, to put a really metaphysical and philosophical spin on it, the fishing is actually kind of secondary. It's the state of mind that I'm able to enter while I'm fly fishing that is really the most appealing thing to me. I can literally go hours with what seems like not a single thought floating through my head. I am so immersed in the present moment of what I'm doing that I literally wake up after a few hours, kind of like sort of when you drive home from work every day and you get to a stoplight and all of a sudden like a fire engine goes by and you're like, oh geez, and you're awake again. It's that same kind of feeling where I'm in my subconscious mind wandering around while I'm doing a physical activity.
So that's your flow state.
Yeah, exactly. Catching fish is certainly something I love to do, but over the years I've discovered that that's actually a bonus to the overall activity itself.
And that's great that you have that you can do with your dad as well.
That has been a huge part of my life. I started fly fishing when I was 12. I feel like I grew up with a fishing rod in my hand. Fly fishing's, certainly another level up in terms of technique and skill. So I didn't really start that until I was 12 or 13. Took a while to get good at it. As a kid, I thought my dad owned a magic fly rod. Wherever he pointed it, there seemed to be a fish. And eventually I, got to the point where I could kind of do that same thing myself.
I'm thinking of that book, A River Runs Through It.
Yes. The book was great. The movie was a little, the ending was a little rough, but the first 2/3 of it are fantastic.
Well, and just the descriptions of fly fishing at the beginning of the book, I recall.
Yeah. In my household, there's no clear division between fly fishing and religion. I might as well have that plaque on my front door as well.
Right. Now you're talking about being the VP of sales. And I also spent some time reading your blog, and you're talking about soft skills. And how do you apply those soft skills in selling?
Well, I'm not a, hard sell, sign here to get a discount kind of approach in my sales. I really consider myself an educator as to what my company does. If I do my job well, I feel like I'm educating the client or prospective client as to what we bring to the table and how we could be the best solution of all of the competitors that do what we do. And I have found that to be very, very successful because even being in sales, I hate being sold something, right? I don't like the feeling. I think it greatly increases the buyer's remorse stage that follows up somebody feeling like they got, pushed into a decision and being sold. If we're going to have, what I do is a very long-term relationship-based working agreement. And so I want to start off on the right foot by presenting all the facts, what we do well, how we can help, and let them decide. And if I am their partner of choice, then we will have a really good functional working relationship for the duration of that client choosing our service.
As a sales professional, what would you say to someone like me who is more strong on the creativity part and the content creation, but less on the selling skills?
Well, certainly any way that you can bring value to somebody is a big, big help. So like I'm a huge fan of Gary Vaynerchuk. You may be familiar with him as well. You know, he's been preaching that mainstream on social media like crazy for the last couple of years. I've always kind of had that same mindset that I need to find additional ways to bring value to my clients other than just the service itself. You know, sometimes that's just lending an ear, right? I mean, with everything that people are going through right now, there's a few clients that I've called and checked in on, and we've ended up getting into some kind of deep conversations about things that seemingly they hadn't talked to anybody else to about in a while. And I don't have that relationship with all of my clients, but the ones that I do, taking a moment like that and checking in on somebody provided so much value to them at that time. Or even something simple like remembering somebody's birthday, right? Keith Ferrazzi's book, Never Eat Alone, right? Talking about taking a moment and calling somebody, not sending a message on LinkedIn, not shooting them a text message, but picking up the phone and saying, hey, I know it's your birthday. Hopefully you're not working too hard. I was thinking about you. Those kind of things. You're separating yourself by taking those extra moments of time to spend with somebody. And that goes way outside the bounds of my company's service itself. So those are the kind of things, you know, I could easily see you doing very, very well with. And the other, and offsetting some of the things that you maybe feel like, you know, you don't do quite as well in terms of on the true, you know, selling side.
And I can tell that you internalize that philosophy that Gary Vaynerchuk talks about, like of just freely giving what you have and not so much focused on, you know, what am I getting back? Or what are my social media numbers coming back? You're just giving and giving. And you probably apply that to your burgeoning speaking career as well.
Absolutely. Last week, I actually did 2 talks for Mothers Against Drunk Driving. I have a personal story that ties in with that organization. But you know, there's never any opportunity to get paid for that. It's strictly volunteer. It is something that I believe in and want to give back to. And, you know, it does afford me an opportunity to practice my craft. But I really looked at that as an opportunity to give back to an organization that's doing some really good things.
One of your blog posts, you talk about story, and I really thought this was interesting. The line was, don't sell your own story short.
Yes.
And I would love to hear about your amazing story, and also how, you know, the thing that really stuck out with me, besides the incredible nature of your story, was how you had to wrestle now with that story to be able to make it part of you, something that you could share and have it be kind of an asset for you. You know, you had to come at peace with your story. So I'm interested in both parts of that.
Yeah. So, 2015, I was headed to go fishing with my dad. Luckily, he was not with me in the car. I was headed from Phoenix to Payson, Arizona, which is northeast of Phoenix, about 90 minutes. Oddly enough, I was on the road 60 minutes earlier than I had planned. That's the weekend that we have the time reset for Spring Forward. And my phone had actually set an hour earlier. So my alarm went off at 4 a.m. instead of 5 a.m. So I get in the car. I had everything loaded up the night before. I head north. I'm cresting over top of the biggest mountain between Phoenix and Payson, headed down the other side of the hill. And I can see in the distance, there's a construction zone, the flashing lights, and the road was narrowing down to 1 lane. And I was in my Toyota Camry, which sits kind of low, and there was concrete barriers on either side. And all of a sudden, coming around the curve, there's headlights coming towards me. It happened in an instant. I didn't see the guy coming. I screamed, no, 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 and bam, I went to an instant stop, getting hit head on by a drunk driver. So we were in the middle of nowhere. I didn't have a cell phone signal. The accident was pretty bad. You may have seen the picture of the car in the blog post that I wrote about. I walked away from that with literally a scratch on the back of my left hand. That was it.
Wow.
The airbags deployed, the safety features in that car did its job, and I was unharmed. The drunk driver never attempted to brake. He didn't react from his side of the crash. He was so intoxicated, he got air evac'd back to Scottsdale thinking that he had a head injury, and it turned out he was just that drunk. So I had to call my dad once I got a cell phone signal and said, hey, this is what happened. Here's where I need you to come get me. And it took a while before I could really talk about that story without having to relive the flashback of those headlights coming out of nowhere. But it took 45 minutes for the paramedics to get to where we were. And in that time, I sat there thinking about two things. One, how fortunate I was. And two, if this is, the proverbial second chance, what should I do with my time that I have been granted? And I'd always thought about public speaking. I have a huge passion for helping people, which is why I loved, doing the racquetball coaching for as long as I have. And the opportunity to expand that through the venue of public speaking just seemed to jump out at me at that moment. And that literally that day, that morning when that crash happened, was when I decided to pursue public speaking. And now I get the opportunity to speak in the business school at ASU and also in Northern Arizona University. I did a talk yesterday for a group called Spear Education. I've got some other stuff lined up for this month. So I'm quickly gaining some momentum in that area to be able to share my knowledge base with people who would be receptive to that.
Wow, that's quite an inspiration.
Thank you. I got lucky. I have no qualms about saying that. I was very, very lucky in that situation because most of the people who tell a story in front of an audience at Mothers Against Drunk Driving events are absolutely tragic. They're almost always involved losing a family member or somebody ending up in a wheelchair or things like that. And that wasn't my story. And it also took me a little bit to understand that, hey, just because I don't have the same level of tragedy in my story, that doesn't invalidate what happened to me as an experience, and also doesn't mean that there aren't takeaways to be shared with, the masses.
And I lost my 22-year-old uncle way back when I was about 15 years old.
Yeah, it impacts way more people than most of the public realizes. It is, and it's gotten way better statistically. When Mothers Against Drunk Driving was formed, there was about 25,000 fatalities. I believe it was fatalities a year. That number has been cut in by about 60%, which is fantastic. And probably with the automation of self-driving cars and things like that, we'll continue to see decreases. But obviously some of that comes to personal choices and having a system in place that avoids you making a decision after you've been drinking altogether. That's really where the true solution lies.
I know that you give presentations and speeches to young professionals and college students. What do you find what do they need to hear? What are the big lessons that you're teaching them, and what do they need to learn?
Well, a couple of things. I'll keep it to 2 points. One, I, from experience, know that trying to carve a living out of something that you're super passionate about may not be the right way to go. And I don't think anybody ever really shares that advice. Everybody always tells you, find a job you love and you'll never work a day in your life, right? Well, I can tell you as a competitive racquetball player, that was the only thing I was really certain about in my late teens and early 20s that I wanted to do. And so I quit college, started pursuing that. And, I should have been sponsored by, Top Ramen, because I lived on ramen noodles and, I was scrounging to be able to afford what I was doing, pursuing that passion. The problem with that approach is, in my particular sport, I knew that I didn't expect to ever reach number one. There were guys that were far more athletically talented than I was and had started 10 years before I did. So I didn't think that was my reality, but I also knew that I was not going to make a lot of money in that sport. And so if it had been tennis and I had reached the top 20 in the world, I would be, very well off at this point and teaching tennis lessons on a desert island somewhere for $200 an hour, right? Racquetball does not afford us that luxury. So I took something that I loved and I turned it into a job. And by the time I retired, I was completely burned out on it. And so I want to make people aware of that, hey, you may be better off having a career and having something that you're super passionate about that's separate, that you dedicate as much time and effort to as you want without ever making it your primary source of income. So that's something I share with a lot of people, because I just don't think that's the alternative to find a job you love and you'll never work a day in your life is ever really presented at all. Secondarily, there's an awful lot of struggle right now with the use of technology and the diminishing social skills that go along with it. So when I go and stand in front of a class of 300 in the ASU Business School, for example, there's a lot of kids who will sit and text message friends that they are sitting next to in a social setting instead of literally having a conversation with them.
Right.
So the way I spin that into real world skills is, how are you going to come into a job interview and not be able to shake hands like you mean it, look somebody in the eye, be able to hold the attention of maybe 6 people who are on a panel interview, and represent yourself well enough to stand out above everybody else. So my goal by speaking at the schools is to give them a year or 2 of practice getting ready before they graduate for that real world job interview. So start bringing some of those things to light ahead of time and giving them, homework of, talking to their friends more, practicing interviews, starting a conversation with the barista at Starbucks or Dutch Brothers that they frequent on a regular basis, just for the practice, seems to be paying off with the kids that have followed up with me.
That's a great point. And we're back to the social skills part, where you're learning how to work a room, and this person's not really paying attention. This is the real decision maker over here. And
right.
I agree.
Yeah, you and I grew up in a time where we had a foot in the world before all of this technology was available, and the millennials get a lot of some negative things said about them, and the Gen Zers also. Millennials are now old enough to have kids of their own, and they're following in those same footsteps of tons of technology and all of that. And some of those old school skills are so critical into standing out and making yourself just a little bit better than every other candidate that's applying for a job, or integrating yourself into a new work culture when you do get hired.
I find it so interesting, this point that you're making about living your passion, or that you don't want to make your passion that your full-time job. Do you see a difference between what you would consider as a passion and the purpose of your life? Like you obviously have identified your purpose of the public speaking and giving presentations and sharing your story, but compared to like racquetball, and also compared to fly fishing, that's something that you love, right, and that can continue on. Racquetball had its path also. So how do you have a difference between a purpose and a passion?
So I do happen to love my day job, but 10 years ago, I had no intent of getting into the workers' comp space, right? It wasn't even on my radar. It found me. It happened to be a good fit for my skill set. I enjoy doing presentations to a decision-making team for a large corporation. And oddly, it oddly mirrors my former life, right? When I was a pro racquetball player, I would pack up my stuff. I'd fly to a city. I would play a match against an opponent that I may not have seen before, do my thing. And then at the end of the weekend, I would come home. In my day job, I fly to the East Coast, for example. I meet in front of in the boardroom in front of a decision-making team. I do my thing for maybe 90 minutes, and then I fly home, and hopefully the victory is, yes, we choose you as our partner. So there actually was a lot of parallel there, but I'm fortunate in the sense that I happen to grow to love my job. But when I talk about my absolute love and passion for fly fishing, lots of people tell me, oh, you should be a fly fishing guide. No, I learned my lesson through racquetball that I don't want to take something that I love and make it into a job. I happened to follow a fly fishing guide that I had hired in Colorado when I went on a trip. I follow him on Instagram. And just this morning, he tweeted, today was day 94 in a row of him being on the river with clients. Now, that makes him a very successful fly fishing guide. However, how much time has he spent fishing this summer? Not very much. And
Right.
some of his clients are brand new. So he's not necessarily having a leisurely day on the river, enjoying himself. He is working, trying to get that client to land one fish or to throw a decent cast to get that person a chance to get hooked up with a fish. So he's earning his money on a lot of those days. And those are the kind of things that, in my opinion, eventually detract from the experience of doing that as a passion versus doing that as a job.
When you present in front of decision makers, what is your tip for being persuasive?
Oh, that's a great question. Doing your homework in advance is a huge help. These days, it's almost everybody that I deal with is going to have a LinkedIn profile, possibly a bio on their company website, things like that. If in some cases, a risk manager who is my target audience may be on a committee or doing a workers' comp study, something like that, that I can fold into that conversation. But knowing who I'm speaking with in advance, meaning their job role, what their struggles are. If I can find out if they, are they with a competitor currently, then I know to ask things like, if you could wave a magic wand, what would you change about your current partnership with my competitor? And I want to come in informed and ready with questions, but I want to listen way more than I talk. I want to kind of give them some leading questions and let them take over for a little bit and find out where the aches and pains are and pair my solution to that instead of coming in and saying, here's all the things that my company can do for you. If they're using a competitor, they're probably getting 7 out of 10 of those things already satisfied. If they've never used a service like ours, they don't know what they don't know yet. And so they're in a discovery phase, and I need to find out what problems that they're trying to solve and why that prompted them to seek out my service. And then again, pair my solutions with the problems that they have.
Very nice. I think I'll use some of those tips to try to get my convince my
Feel
wife
free.
to choose my restaurant instead of hers.
Feel free.
What's a hobby you enjoy that most people may be surprised about?
That's a good question. My wife and I actually do, referencing the Gary V thing from earlier, Gary Vaynerchuk, we actually do some reselling or flipping online. So we both have an OfferUp account, and we will go to thrift stores or Goodwill or sometimes even yard sales and places like that, and find things of value that somebody is trying to unload for $1 and sell it for $20 online. And it's a throwback to my roots coming from rural Pennsylvania. We used to go to yard sales all the time when I was a kid, and I thought for sure I would never ever go do that again. And here we are coming full circle, much later in my life to kind of doing that same thing. So I enjoy the action of it. It's not, I'm well compensated in my day job. I'm not doing it really as a side hustle for the money part so much as I really do enjoy going to a yard sale where somebody's got an item that they don't realize the value of it, or they're moving and they're just in a hurry to, thin out what they're taking with them, kind of a thing. And so, to some degree, capitalize on that by spending $1 or $2 on an item and then listing it on OfferUp, and literally sometimes the same day selling it for $20. Maybe it's the sales guy in me, but I do get a kick out of that still. And we put the money in an envelope, and my wife and I took a vacation. I went to a conference for work, but she got to tag along to make it a vacation to Tennessee not too long ago. And our little side hobby ended up paying for the entire trip.
Wow. Well, you and your wife would get along with my mother because she's a huge yard sale and estate planning person.
It is a unique group of people that do that for sure.
Yeah. Well, I always think it's funny because you go to a yard sale and you can actually see the stages of a person's life. You know, you see the
Absolutely.
college workbooks, and now you see the,
Yep.
100 things to know when you're expecting. And
Yep.
now we've got the Buns of Steel videos.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
you mentioned finances, and I know on your blog, you talk a lot about
Mhm.
financial advice and financial concepts. What are some of the key books or mentors, resources that you that you agree with and that you like?
Mhm. Well, anytime I get to talk about that, my first thought is don't do as I did, because I
Mhm.
did all of the things wrong that lots of other people do too, right? My first exposure to credit cards was a credit card that I got when I enrolled in college, and the I remember opening the envelope, and the presentation of that credit card was, in case something happens while you're away at school, here's a $1,500 emergency fund. That's basically how it was presented to me, right? Well, that sounds great. However, my backup plan or emergency fund quickly turned into, yeah, I'll buy beer on Friday for everybody if you guys pay me cash, and I'll make my minimum monthly payment so that I can keep my credit card going, right?
Right.
So I was mismanaging money from the start. I still to this day, because I did finish school a little later on, I went back to the University of Phoenix to finish my bachelor's degree. I did that in my 30s. So I actually still do have some student debt. So I would have done that a little bit differently too, had I known other options. My wife and I are big Dave Ramsey fans. In fact, while we were in Tennessee for that conference I was at, we actually went to his studio and watched him do one of his shows and took some pictures with him and stuff like that. So his methodology is very, very simple. It's not always easy to follow, but the process is simple.
Mhm.
So I love his approach. For a younger audience, I typically will recommend to them Ramit Sethi, who wrote the book, I Will Teach You to Be Rich. Um, I think for a younger audience who's much more into technology and having that kind of do a lot of things for you, you can automate an awful lot of the processes that he talks about for paying off debt and saving money and things like that. And so for an older audience, Dave Ramsey is my answer. And for a younger audience, Ramit Sethi, I think, kind of covers the bases on both ends.
In my time management system, I like to have people have a financial role that they take on, one of the hats that they wear, even if it's a student, high school student.
Mm-hmm.
So I love to hear more resources about that, because really it's a key part of life that we've got to get ahead of.
It is. There's so many traps that are so easy to fall into. And, at one point, including my car, and oddly enough, the crash I had in 2015 was also the impetus to really turn that stuff around too. I made one more classic mistake, which was my car was totaled. I got handed a check. So I went and bought a newer version of the same car that I had just crashed. And now, once again, I've got a $400 car payment because I didn't pay cash for it. I put money down and then financed it. And when you're financing it, you have to have higher insurance coverage. So I was spending about $650 a month on my car. And probably 3 months into that, my wife finally kicked me in the shins and said, hey, are we going to keep doing it this way? Or are we going to finally, do the Dave Ramsey plan? And so I sold that car. I took a hit on it financially, but I got out from under it. I bought a 2002 Toyota 4Runner, and I drove that for several years. And luckily for me, I sold it for the same amount I bought it for, because those things happen to age very well. And the next car I bought for cash, she owns her car outright, and we have erased all of the credit card debt. In January of this coming year, we will be starting a full court press to finish paying off our house. So
Right.
in a 5-year span, we've gone from me being $70,000 in debt to us as a couple being on the verge of paying our house off and being completely debt free.
In terms of financial advice, and when you first started, we were talking about selling skills. I was thinking about Grant Cardone.
Yes.
And like his approach with finance is that he's a madman. Like he's the opposite of he's like
Absolutely.
enemies with Dave Ramsey.
Yes.
So
Um, so some of that's a lifestyle choice. I have no desire to own multiple businesses or even multiple properties as income opportunities and things like that. So I don't think that his methodology is the right fit for me. I agree with what he does. Robert Kiyosaki is, same mindset, right? Of you have good debt and bad debt. And if you're making money off of your debt, you're doing it the right way. And I completely see the validity to that. But for me, I want to spend time focused on other things. And so therefore the Dave Ramsey approach of being completely debt free and having my income be focused on my retirement and things like that, once I get to the point of being truly debt free, was just a better fit for my approach. For my wife, who's a lot less risk tolerant than I am financially, she can barely sit through one of Grant Cardone's YouTube talks because it's just completely the opposite of how she sees things. She's far more comfortable with having money in the bank and being debt free than any other method of that.
do you find his selling advice to be helpful?
It's not my style, but I think for what he does, it works. And especially for his personality, right?
Yeah, I guess he's not so much about educating and being supportive. He's like, let's go.
Right. Let's do business. Let's hit the ground running. Let's go make another $1 million. Again, for some people, that's the perfect fit, right? For me, personality wise, that doesn't really align with my approach. And I also, I would envision Grant Cardone being more of a transactional salesperson where everything has a timeline. I'm looking to buy something, make some money and exit from it, or turn it over to somebody else, things like that. In my line of work, I am in a relationship business, and that's ongoing for a long, long time. So as I mentioned earlier, I think that the softer sell and the educational approach for me is a better fit for me personally and the type of sales that I do.
What are your thoughts on investing in the long-term, stock markets or that sort of stuff?
Yeah, again, something I didn't do right, but I preach for other people to do a better job of. I missed out on a whole lot of compound interest by not having a fully funded Roth IRA by the time, when I turned 18, right? If I would have been smart enough to do that, I could have retired by now if I chose to. I've turned 50 this year, so you can do the math on, the 32 years and the compound interest. If I would have just done that, I would be in a completely different financial situation at this point.
Wait, so
I just recently exited what I would consider normal and troublesome finances, like lots of other people have. So it took me a long time to right that ship.
you're saying when you were 18 that the maximum you would have had would be what?
I think even back then it was $6,000 that you could put in a Roth IRA to fully fund it for the year. So if I would have done that at 18 and just done that annually and then had the compound interest that went along with it, I would be well into the millions of dollars in terms of retirement at this stage.
From the age of 18 on.
Correct.
Okay.
In terms of the stuff I do now, I do own a little Bitcoin because I'm like lots of other people, I'm holding out hope that does what, as advertised. If you look at any 10-year period on the stock market, the mutual funds and other opportunities typically will have a positive return, some more than others. So a diversified portfolio is very important. I loved Tony Robbins' book, Money Mastering the Game, because his amalgamation of all those different people who are in the finance world was a very different outcome than what most people get as professional advice for retirement planning and investing. So I have kind of pushed myself towards that way to outline a portfolio that he describes in that book versus maybe some of the classic advice that you would get directly from a financial advisor.
Yeah, I've had a couple things that I've wrestled over because just like you, I read a lot and listen to a lot of different experts in finance. And one of my questions is between index funds and mutual fund, something that's professionally managed that you get that you're paying a big commission, as
Mhm.
opposed to, it seems, the index funds where they take less of that chunk of your capital out, has been an issue. And then also just wrestling with trying to build my business here, and you need cash flow for that,
Yes.
in terms of, do you want it to keep growing, grow more slowly, but hopefully a lot more, in the long run, with
Right.
investing, like it's like, I need that money now. So I guess
Yeah.
it's a balance.
Yeah, and for me, that's the twofold reason that I'm taking the approach I am with public speaking. Again, I don't want that. I don't want to scratch and claw my way, scratch and claw a living out of my passion. So I'm keeping my day job, which I really love, and I am good at, and have a lot of success with, and that pays the bills and then some. That allows me the opportunity to grow my speaking business a lot more slowly and do stuff for free without having to worry about it. Or, oh my gosh, with the pandemic, I had a bunch of speaking engagements that canceled. Now what do I do? I've got a mortgage payment or whatever. So it takes all of that off the table and allows me to focus on the organic growth of it, and not necessarily running it truly like a business that I need to make a certain revenue stream each month and hit a profitability number to be able to pay my own bills.
Have you
I have
gotten
that
into,
luxury because I choose to keep my day job.
have you pursued webinars and e-courses?
Yes, I have switched over to doing some stuff online. The talk I did for the group I mentioned earlier yesterday was virtual. The talks for the MAD group, I actually did get to do those in person. I did both talks with a mask on, so that was interesting. Felt like I was getting winded the whole time because I'm telling an emotional story, and with the mask over my face, it felt like I was hyperventilating sometimes in the front of the classroom there. But yeah, I'm always looking for ways to continue my reach and outreach that I have. Some of the schools that I was aligned to speak with in person in the fall probably will continue to be virtual for now. I love doing it live. I think that is in front of an audience. That's far more exciting for sure. But I also need to pivot to what the world allows right now. And first, in some cases, that is a virtual training session.
Now, in usual times without the pandemic thing, when you do a free speaking engagement, what do you ask in return from them? Or what's involved with that?
So I'll use one that I did not too long ago as an example. I have a friend that has he refers to it as a self-help group, but it is a networking group, by definition. And the uniqueness about the people in this group is that they are all people who used to be quote unquote workers who now have found themselves in a management role for the first time. So typically smaller companies that have had success and grown, and just by virtue of tenure and experience, someone is getting thrust into a management role where literally all of their lives they've just been in the back room working, and now all of a sudden they're expected to lead a team of people who were truly their peers up until a week ago. And that's a tough shift, right? I mean, there's the classic error of taking your best salesperson and making them the sales manager is an easy parallel to that too. So I went and spoke with that group, at the request of a friend of mine who was in that group. And I said, I'm happy to do this for you. All I ask is that at the end of the talk, I can advertise where to find me, and that I would be happy to discuss with anyone else one-on-one or group coaching, or doing consulting work for their group. And he had no problem with that. Of course, I was kind of doing him a favor with the talk anyway, and he was happy to help me in exchange for how I was helping him. So I actually got 3 more opportunities out of that one lunch meeting that I did for that networking group. And those opportunities each have led to additional opportunities. So that's why I'm happy to, do something for free on the front end, knowing that if I provide enough value, I will get more opportunities out of it.
Is the college speaking circuit a good opportunity? Is it difficult to get your foot in the door with it?
It's not paid, so depends on how you measure that.
Hmm.
I do it because I love it. Because I spent so much time with the college kids on the racquetball team, it's a group that I'm very comfortable around. Um, Part of the reason I did it was to get my feet wet and learn the ropes of public speaking. Part of it was that, being a resident guest lecturer at the W.P. Carey School of Business at Arizona State University, and also for the W.A. Frank School of Business at Northern Arizona University, looks very good on my speaking resume. Additionally, all of the professors that I've spoken in their classes have told me the same thing. When they have kids that go through their class and graduate and go out into the real world, they will have those kids reach out and say, hey, my company's looking for a speaker. Would you be interested in coming and talking to my new employers group? And so I'm sort of building an army of people that will hopefully remember who I am. And when an opportunity in the future arises, hopefully they think of me and point their employer in my direction.
That's great. Are you part of a speakers bureau?
I'm not. I never did Toastmasters or anything like that. I have had a lot of people tell me to do that, and I just didn't think that I needed it per se. Yes, I could be more polished at what I do or do things a little differently, but I also don't want to lose my voice and my personality in what I do by following a structure that somebody else thinks is the right way to do it. So I'm not an NSA member or any of the other groups either. I did explore it. The problem with that is that I would be a newbie, and B, I don't have a national platform built just yet. So I'm one of many on those websites that I would be, I'm going to be towards the bottom of the list when people are looking for a speaker. So I didn't see enough value in those to pay the fees and go to the meetings and all that stuff. I'm taking it upon myself to build my audience and grow my business organically.
I came across an excellent DVD about speaking skills by Patricia Fripp. Have you ever heard of her?
I have not.
Yeah, she's someone to check out. She's really, she has a British, she's a
Is that
British,
Frick?
Fripp.
Oh, Fripp.
Patricia
Gotcha.
Fripp. Yeah. Yeah, she's great. She has she's got 1 million YouTube videos on.
Okay, great.
I think she focuses more on like helping corporate people that have to give presentations.
Okay.
But just for me, it was a big help. Even just having a great opening question. She gives you really specific, instead of saying, well, okay, the bathrooms are over there, and it's nice to be here. And I thank Johnny and thank Dave. But this is a way, whatever, imagine I'm in line at the FBI, and, it's some kind of a crazy story that gets the person right involved.
Yeah. I never have mastered anything that I do, right? I want to be a perpetual student. I'm always looking, reading and listening to podcasts and watching videos and stuff and pulling information from a bunch of different places to add to what do I do. So I appreciate the reference to her. I'll definitely check that out.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I'm getting a ding there with my son, a picture of my son eating tacos. I guess that was a very important thing I had to say.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Good. No, I just mentioned some of these speaking things probably from my own usage of trying to get better as a speaker and seeing what, that you're obviously much further along to see what's working for you and what's not.
I had some advantages being on the faculty at ASU, teaching the racquetball classes like I did. I had an inside track, and in some ways it was simple as me asking my students in my racquetball classes, do any of you attend a class that has a guest lecturer on the schedule this semester? And a couple of them raised their hand. 2 of the 3 of them actually happened to be in the same professor's class. They connected me with him. Luckily for me, he was very open to that. Made it clear, it couldn't be a sales pitch or anything like that. We discussed what he thought would be most relevant for his classes. And so I wrote something custom for that. It happened to be about getting ready for your first real world interview. And I sit on the interview committee at my company. So it was an easy thing for me to talk about and write some custom material for them. And that just, launched our working relationship together. And then when I do that for that school, it's easy for me to go to another school and say, hey, I'm doing this here. I'd also like to offer my services for you guys too, and just continue to expand from there.
I watched one of your videos of you presenting to, it looked like college students or high school students.
On the website?
Yeah.
Yeah, that would have been from NAU. Yes.
Okay. And I could tell you had a real easy presentation style. And I think you were talking about that it's not just about money, with the profession that, you have friends that make 28,000 and some that make 3 million, but it's,
and are still miserable.
right.
Yeah. The goal is absolutely to be happy, not to be rich. If you can be happy and rich, fantastic. But, circling back to your point about Grant Cardone, I don't want to be another Grant Cardone, right? I'm kind of a homebody. I love to fly fish. I love spending time with my wife and doing things, like hiking and stuff like that. We're not somebody that's going to hop on a private jet and go to France for a long weekend kind of a thing, right? That's just not us. So for me, happiness at any monetary level is the goal. If I happen to get to the point where I'm somebody like Gary Vaynerchuk or Jocko Willink that is commanding literally $50,000 per speaking engagement, I'm certainly not going to turn it down, but I want to be happy doing that. And otherwise, to me, it's just not worth it.
And I appreciate that you didn't bring in the language of Gary Vaynerchuk in our podcast.
He is very upfront about that. That's his style. He's a Jersey guy and he's very brash and outspoken and stuff. And, for him, that works. And he's admitted, I'm sure that I have lost opportunities because of the way I present myself. Not my style. I'm not knocking his approach, but it's just not how I choose to present myself.
I have a real roller coaster relationship with Gary V. At times I'm like, this guy is just a jerk. I can't stand it. And then he'll say something, just a simple sentence. And I'm like, I got to work on that for the next 3 months, just in terms of like posting social media and having a documentation approach instead of the content, just documenting where you are and the importance of whatever you're doing right now, that's important.
Absolutely. And again, back to the creating value, right? I mean, just putting out content all the time is the key, because as clearly you've done your research in advance of the podcast here. So, that I have written and posted about a bunch of different topics, a bunch of different things. And so clearly a lot of what I write would not be of interest to lots of people who read it. But maybe there's a couple people that's exactly what they needed to hear at that moment when they found it. And that hopefully will get them coming back for more, looking for that exact thing to happen again. But I certainly don't labor under the illusion that everything I say is a golden nugget for somebody to walk away with, or for everybody to walk away with every time. That
Right.
would be a little delusional.
Well, that could be a nugget right there.
There you go.
Well, Gary V caused me to get into TikTok, and I actually have a TikTok account, and my kids are crazy about it.
I'm not crazy about it either. And unfortunately I drug my feet, and now it's like, okay, are they going to get bought out? Are they going to get banned? What's happening? My audience is, a lot of my target audience is somebody that would use TikTok, right? Not necessarily a risk manager that I'm going to be dealing with through my day job, but certainly in my speaking engagements, I'm targeting a younger audience, and that's what TikTok targets. But I just don't know that there's so much mindless entertainment on TikTok. I just don't know if me trying to throw, some words of wisdom out there is ever really going to get noticed. So I probably need to trust the process and do it, and quit, dragging my feet and doing a 20% effort at it. Right.
Well, yeah, that was kind of my process with it. Just this isn't my usual target market. But then I took the approach that, I can just say stuff that's, here's a tip on being creative, or here's how to be organized. Here's my planner. And it is kind of focused for younger kids. But
for now.
also that they need that too. And I
Yes.
really started to follow a lot of the people that, there's doctors that are on there and they just give and how do they present that adult material in a way that could be helpful. So I'm just going with it, and it's really not that much time to be able to talk for 30 seconds and then just
Right.
hit send and
Right.
just make it be appropriate. And
Yeah.
so we'll see how it goes. But
Well, if you look at the evolution of Facebook and Instagram, it started out with a very, very young crowd. And then now, you've got people's grandmothers who have Facebook accounts, right? And that's why that younger generation has transitioned away from that to Instagram. And now that same process has repeated itself to some degree, now TikTok is the new cool thing. So it was, a very, very young audience, and then it continues to go up, the age range, and pretty soon grandmas will have TikTok accounts too, and the younger generation will be on to whatever the next latest and greatest thing is.
right. I will say in terms of the search results, that if I put the name of my book, All the Hats We Wear, in this podcast name, that it would be like half of the top 10 are related to some kind of TikTok thing. So
Right.
I guess in that way, there's value there.
Yep, absolutely.
Great. Well, this has been really informative and a pleasure to have you on the show. I've got a final question here.
Sure.
Darrin, Darrin, what's one powerful action step that our listeners can take to help them live a joyful, productive, and fulfilling life?
Know who you are. I think that far too many of us are way too caught up in what we think other people think of us, or what a complete stranger will tweet back at us or comment on an Instagram post or a TikTok post, and take that to heart and think that was a valid assessment of who we are. Again, being around a younger generation quite a bit, I see way too much of that. We all know that social media is a highlight reel of people's lives, not the reality of their lives. And even so, that thought gets lost very quickly, and people will get 100 positive comments on something and one bad comment, and they'll focus on the bad comment. And so you need to be comfortable in your own skin and know who you want to be. I gave the example of not wanting to be the next Grant Cardone. I want to be the best version of me that I can be, not a carbon copy of somebody else. And at a younger age, I didn't have that as well defined as I do now. And I would hope that, 15 years from now, I have an even more clear definition of that, is because it should be an age-long process. But if there's, something to boil it down to, make sure you know who you are and live your life according to that, and not what you perceive everyone else's expectations to be.
That's beautiful. Well, this interview has gone on a lot longer than my usual guest ones, which
Thank
is
you for that.
Yeah. Of course, I'll have editing for 4 hours, but hey.
Well, I've enjoyed it very much. Thank you, Scott.
Good. Well, thanks for being on. This is the All the Hats We Wear podcast. Welcome. This show will teach you the time management skills you need to be joyful, productive, and fulfilled in all areas of life. This is episode 32, and I'm your host, life coach and productivity expert, Scott Snow. I'm so happy to welcome our guest, Darrin Schenck, to the show today. Darrin is currently the Vice President of Sales Marketing at Triage Now, a medical call center working with companies like General Mills, Goodyear Tire and Rubber, American Red Cross, UCLA, Liberty Mutual, and many more. He's a former professional racquetball player, and he spent 3 years in the top 20 in the world on the International Racquetball Tour. Now as a coach, he's in his 13th season as the head coach of the ASU racquetball team, with a national championship and 2-time Collegiate Coach of the Year awards to his credit, as well as producing over 3 dozen collegiate All-Americans. Please welcome Darrin Schenck. You're meant to do great things. If you want to be an innovator and visionary, you have to manage your busy life like one. The All the Hats We Wear planner is the planner for the future. I want to give you a free month of the planner to try out for yourself. Nothing will slip through the cracks anymore. When you use the All the Hats We Wear planner, you'll have everything you need at your fingertips. All of your goals, a vision statement, a list of daily habits, and a checklist to track your progress. Key information for the small and large projects on your plate. Daily sheets to clarify your top outcomes for each day. A week at a glance section to plan for the coming weeks, and much more. The All the Hats We Wear planner will be your roadmap to a more joyful, productive, and fulfilling life. To claim your free month so you can see for yourself how it will streamline your busy life, visit allthehatswewear.com.